Hi, Dr. H here with Family Centered Parenting. And today I want to talk about something really basic and fundamental, and I'm going to call them the 7 steps to enhance your parenting skills. So the first one is listen. Okay, well, we all know we need to listen to each other, but when we're dealing with our children, we need to be active listeners. And an active listener is someone who makes sure they understand what the person who they're listening to is saying. So, to coin a phrase, seek to understand before being understood, which basically means keep your mouth shut, keep your ears open, and make every effort to understand what a person is saying to you. And the best way to check if the person has said something to you is merely say, "This is what I heard. Did I get it right?" And if they agree, then you know at least you understood them. Again, it does not mean you agree. It just means you heard and listened. Why is that so important? Because when we're heard and listened to, it restores our sense of power and control and makes us less needy to exercise power or control through anger, violence, whatever. Very, very important. Number 2, model. You know the saying, walk the walk, not just talk the talk. So, so important for parenting because no matter what we say, our kids are constantly watching us and observing what we do. And as they get older, if they see us do something that's contrary to a rule or an expectation of the family, you bet that child will remind us. So even though we don't realize it, at all times our children are watching us and modeling us. And modeling is unfortunately or fortunately more important than what we say. So walk the walk. So if you don't want your child to get angry easily, then make sure you don't do that. And you control your temper because they're going to read that all the time. If you want your child to be a courteous, respectful person, then when you're with them, they need to see you being courteous and respectful. Number 3, are we on the same page? I've noticed this working with families that this becomes a problem when one parent has a philosophy of parenting different from the other. And what it does is cause obviously conflict between the caregivers, and certainly it has an impact on the children on not knowing exactly where they stand with which parent. Sometimes children could use that to their advantage and manipulate one parent against another. Oh, mom told me I can do this. Dad told me I can do that. Mom says it's wrong. And before you know it, the child is either confused or manipulating. So be on the same page. Come to a compromise. One thing I've told parents, what you're doing now, is it working? Is it satisfying? They say, no, it's really not. So I said, what do you have to lose by trying something new? Try something new for a fixed period of time, see how it works, and if it does work, then maybe you're willing to change your attitude. So really, it's so important for being on the same page, the primary caretakers. The next thing, number 4, is negotiate. Oh, and I know this is going to trigger some immediate defensive responses from parents. Oh, I don't know how to negotiate with my kid. That's not right. Well, the issue is, when do we negotiate? There are times we don't. For example, if we have a rule that's been firmly established with the family and there are steps to be taken or consequences, that's not the time to negotiate. It's done. You broke the rule, you knew what it was, these are the consequences, go forward, no talk. So I'm not talking about negotiating in that. I'm talking about negotiating preemptively, ahead of the time. Be proactive. In other words, for setting rules, family expectations, That's a time where you sit down with your children in a family meeting and discuss and get their input on what a rule should be in the family, what their perspective is, and then a parent gives their perspective, and when everything is all and done, you come to a compromise, and then it's fixed in relative stone until some point further on in a family meeting where modifications and changes need to be made. So negotiating, and the power of it is when you have the child's input into a rule or expectation for the family, and they feel they're going to have a sense of ownership for that rule. And we know when you have a sense of ownership in a rule and it's more consistent with our values, then we are more likely to follow that rule. So we can think of many examples in life. When I do a workshop for a group of parents, one of the first things I say to them is, how many of you have broken a law today? And they kind of look at sheepishly, and these are usually parents who've come out and probably pretty good citizens. And yet I remind them that when they drove either to this particular meeting or sometime during that day, shopping or to work or whatever, that they probably went above the speed limit. In other words, they broke the law. But they didn't feel bad about it. Why? Because we all feel, I guess, that we should be telling ourselves how fast we should be driving. We don't want some arbitrary rule on a sign to dictate to us how fast we should be driving. So therefore, despite the consequences of tickets, insurance surcharges, etc., most people still break the law every single day because the law is not totally consistent with our values. But take an example, let's say shopping at an open area market, a downtown market of some sort, where there are no security cameras, no little tags on, like we see in department stores to prevent theft of getting out the door, and yet very few people steal. Why? Because in our values, we're not going to steal from a person, somebody standing behind a fruit stand or an art stand or jewelry kiosk where they have their stuff on display, and it's one human being. And we really don't want to steal from another human being, most of us. But when we're in a store and it's not personal and it's corporate and we say, oh, Kohl's or Pennies could afford, I can take something, it doesn't feel as bad as taking from another person. So therefore, it's in our value system that we're much less likely to steal from an individual rather than a corporation. Rule number 5, and this is part of our communication skills, is validate. Now, validate means acknowledging the feelings of somebody, even when you feel they're inappropriate, and it's so important to do that before problem solving. Let me give you an example. The classic is the 5-year-old at a birthday party. They're running around with a balloon. Their balloon breaks. They come running to mom or dad or grandma, whoever, and crying, mom, dad, grandma, my favorite balloon broke. Immediately, a parent wants to solve that problem, wants to make them feel better, and says, don't worry, we'll get you another one. And the kid still keeps crying. But if you said to the child, gee, you must be really upset because your favorite balloon broke. What do you think we should do about it? And more often than not, the child will say, get me another one, and we'll stop crying. In other words, validating that what they're feeling is real for them at that moment gives them recognition, power, a sense of control, and therefore they're more likely to calm down, not argue. This is so important, especially with teenagers. Sometimes we know teenagers can be emotionally very volatile, and as a parent, we just want to say, oh, no big deal, calm down, Yes, your best friend didn't invite you to this party or dissed you on Facebook or Instagram or TikTok, and you're crying. Instead of just trying to mitigate it initially, I strongly recommend just acknowledge, Jeannie, you must be really upset because your friend dissed you on TikTok. And now, when you've acknowledged and you say, what do you think could be done about it? And Jeannie will probably calm down and start talking about with you, sharing some problem solving strategies so that, they feel more in control, calm down, and it opened the door for problem solving because you validated. If you immediately try to minimize, they will be turned off and you will not get a response from them. As I said, it's important for children at all ages, but particularly crucial with teenagers who tend to be emotionally a bit more volatile. A bit is maybe an understatement for some of our teens. Number 6, control your emotions. It's very important when your child breaks a rule and you know discipline is in order. Make sure you calm down, because when we're angry, we don't think straight. And there's a physiological reason for that that's been documented. When we're very angry, our brains, our cortisol level, our stress level triggers. It floods our bodies from our adrenal glands, it goes to our head, shuts down our prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking part of our brain. And we tend, when we're very angry, to say things or do things that are really not rational, that we can't back up. The old adage, what I say in anger is really the truth, is totally false. What we say when we're totally angry means we're only operating with our reptilian brain without our full functioning intellect. And we're about to say something that we know in the long run we can't back up is hurtful. So if your child does something wrong and you say you're grounded for a month, you can't watch TV for 2 weeks, and then realize that's not practical, they have activities they have to go to, and then you have to backtrack, etc. So I recommend taking a pause. I know I've said to my own children, I am so angry right now, you need to get out of my face, go to your room somewhere, and in 10 minutes from now, we'll sit down and talk about it. In other words, we take a pause. And so then when they come back, we can now do discipline and problem solving that's rational, that makes sense, that's not over the top, that we don't have to back down from. The number 7, another important thing, and this comes up and the power of a family meeting, is to rehearse, to simulate situations and practice responses before they happen. What do I mean by that? Well, let's say you have your maybe middle school, preteen, early teenager gets invited to a party, and there's no parent around or in another room, and one of the kids, young people, smuggle a bottle of booze or into the thing and try to offer some of your child a drink. And there they are, faced with the dilemma. Gee, if I don't do it, I'll be laughed at, I'll be called names, a lot of peer pressure. But I know in my family, drinking at this age, I promised I wouldn't. And the dilemma, and frankly, peer pressure will usually win out. So how do we prepare our children for this? Well, I recommend in a family meeting, at a point, we start rehearsing and anticipating some situations and model and talk about what a child might do if they were faced with this situation. If you give them that armor when they go out in the world and they're faced with those kinds of situations, they now have a proper response that will help them resist peer pressure and also adhere to the values of the family. So a child might say in this situation, no thank you. My family, we've all agreed and promised that we will not drink till we're of legal age, and I really believe that it's powerful, so thank you very much, but I'm not going to participate. If they say that with strength, with the feeling of backing of their family, then they're more likely to resist peer pressure. So I've gone through 7 steps to enhance your parenting skills. How are you going to remember those? Well, frankly, I'll make a plug right now because in my book, Family Centered Parenting, we go over all of these steps in different chapters. There's a chapter on effective communication, which goes through listening and rehearsing. We talk about controlling your emotions. We talk about negotiating. We talk about modeling. A lot of examples on how to set up a family mission, how to make your family adhere to your family's values. So I recommend get a hold of my book, Family Centered Parenting, your guide to growing great for families. It's available on my website, familycenteredparenting.com, and also on Amazon. So with that, stay tuned, keep watching our videos, and fun to talk to you today, and look forward to speaking to you again. Take care.